This episode of On the Beat is brought to you by Ingles. Shop online with Ingles Curbside Pickup. New curbside stores opening every week. Please welcome Mike Griffith.
Well, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's Ingles on the Beat show and a really special presentation for you tonight. This is the biggest story of the offseason and really the biggest story in recent college athletic history. And what we're talking about is the new model for college athletics. When we opened this Pandora's box last summer with rules changes for NIL agreements and one-time transfers, I think we all suspected we could see some movement. I think we all suspected we could see some players get some large deals and contracts. And we knew that it would affect how coaches recruited and retained players. But we're still learning just how much impact this will have. And joining us tonight, University of Georgia. I can't say it's a University of Georgia. It's not a University of Georgia business, but they're affiliated with the University of Georgia. Not officially, but unofficially. This is going to get complex, so try and stay with me. Classic City Collectives is what it's called. And we have the CEO tonight with us, Matt Hibbs. And Matt, I really appreciate you joining us. I want you to try and explain this complex web of the future of college athletics. I know some fans are saying, no, take it back. We don't want it. We don't want NIL. Look, it's here. It's not going away. It's been pushed through. It's legislative now. You know, it's gone through our government, and it's not going back. It's going forward. And now it's a matter of how each school manages their players and how these collectives agencies, which essentially put the student athletes in position to get NIL deals, it's like how well can they get this business set up and be the most effective? And just a quick background on you, Matt. You were a year ago at this time, I believe you were working at UGA in the compliance office. So people are now, this is really, so we got a compliance officer a minute ago, right? Now he's the CEO of the collectives agency. So Matt, thanks for joining us. And open it up, man. Where do we start with this?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's an exciting time, in all of college athletics, but especially here at Georgia. Look, July 1, everything changed, right? There's been points in history where college athletics has, quote unquote, changed. Oh, this is the end of college athletics. This is one of those examples where, half the people say, oh, we're never coming back from this. And the other half, like, this is how it should have been the whole time. So what do we do whenever the things change? We embrace them. Okay, that's the way that you stay ahead. So that's what we're doing. We're embracing this change. We're trying to build the best collective in the country. And I think we definitely have the pieces in place to do that. I have 13 years of experience in college athletics. I've been at multiple institutions, Miami, Tennessee, Ohio State, 3 years at Georgia working with Coach Smart. So I understand the business. Like I understand what the ins and outs are of college athletics. And having my director of operations, John Staten, who was just on the football team last year, he understands what it means to be a player. He understands how important NIL is to that locker room. So that's the combination of the two is really a home run. No one else in the country has that, and Georgia's really going to be able to benefit.
Right. So, you heard Matt talk about his background in compliance, and why is that important? Because this is a landscape that is ever changing. And one of the things that Georgia and folks that follow the Bulldogs know this, Josh Brooks, President and President Moore, they are going to be on the cutting edge, but at the same time, very compliant. There's a lot of gray areas, and having someone like Matt handling this collective, this is somebody that Georgia trusts. So again, while he doesn't work for Georgia, he will essentially work with Georgia. In a sense here, this is where it gets tricky, Matt. And Kirby Smart and Josh Brooks have endorsed Matt. They can't endorse the business necessarily because technically the schools can't land the NIL deals, right? And yet they want their student athletes to be able to get these NIL deals. So they need to have, I suppose, an association may be the best word, with businesses that land NIL. And Matt's Classic City Collectives is the one that Georgia trusts to come through the front door and handle this properly. Matt, I don't know if I'm butchering this, but I'm trying to get it across that there's an association without you necessarily working for the university or being a part of the university.
Yeah, I'll clean it up for you a little bit. So yeah, technically the university itself cannot pay an athlete, right? They cannot pay a student athlete for an NIL deal. They can't have an office in-house like marketing and development and compliance. They can't have an NIL office and just be brokering deals all day. That's basically the one main rule that you can't do right now. So what's the next best thing? The next best thing is to have somebody who understands your university running the outside entity. And we are completely unaffiliated with the University of Georgia. We do not receive money from Georgia. We do not receive any type of funding at all from the University of Georgia. Do I know people there? Of course I do. Do I have communications? I'm allowed to have communication. That's perfectly legal. What they cannot do, they cannot set up a deal. They cannot get it to the finish line and just kick it over to me and be like, hey, say on the dotted line to make it legal. We're actually out there, raising money. We are facilitating NIL opportunities. We're creating a sustainable platform for these athletes to be able to capitalize on their NIL. And yeah, I will talk to people at Georgia to understand, what's going on with the team. Like, I need to know who some of these people are, right? Just kind of get a better understanding of what they like, what they're interested in, who might need money, who's, just the understanding the landscape of the team, of all teams, all 21 sports. So yeah, we're completely unaffiliated, but because I've been there, I understand what that means to operate inside that building. So that's a massive, massive advantage for us.
So backing this up, last summer, people might remember we had Drew Butler on here and with Icon Source, which is the marketplace, right? The digital marketplace where businesses could come, hook up with the student athletes, right? And then Icon Source would handle the paperwork, send it through compliance to make sure that the Georgia players who did NIL deals last year were in perfect compliance and their deals were recorded correctly. Well, Drew Butler and his team are still a part of this. They're still a part of that digital marketplace. And Drew explained to me last week, Matt, and you can probably go into more detail. He told me to look at this as a three-pronged approach. He said there's going to be businesses that are going to jump into this collectives agency and hook up with certain student athletes or put certain deals out there that student athletes may be interested in. And that's kind of where we were last summer. Two, there's going to be people that are just going to want to give money to this collectives. They're going to say, you know what? We understand that there's student athletes that want NIL deals, and maybe we don't specifically have a business ourselves, but here's a $10,000 donation to try and help these student athletes get NIL money or NIL deals. And then three, there's the DGD fund, which involves Stetson Bennett and John Fitzpatrick. And as you said, Staten was another one. And I'll let you define those three prongs a little bit more, develop that concept that Drew shared with me.
Yeah, and I think it even goes a little bit deeper than that. And, just to touch on Drew, whenever we started this thing, we knew from the very beginning that we wanted Drew Butler and Icon Source to be part of that, a part of what we're doing. So they built our marketplace for us. So whenever you come to our website and you want to do a $100 deal, $200 deal with an athlete, like you go through the Icon Source platform. We thought that was really important. We love their platform. I think it's the best out there. And we love the fact that, they're student athlete first. So just wanted to make sure everybody knows that we are all on board with Icon Source and Drew Butler. But yeah, the down to the deals, there are a lot of different ways for people to contribute and get involved. We've seen, like you said, there is the individual who owns a business and they want 10 student athletes to endorse their business, whether that be social media or a billboard or whatever it may be. So there's that. There are also people who sold their business, they're retired, and they believe in NIL. They believe in helping the student athlete be able to capitalize on their name, image, likeness. So yeah, there's the opportunity for them to contribute to the fund. And then there's also, people who just want to sponsor, whether they sponsor our website, sponsor us, sponsor one of the events that we're going to put on, whether it be a golf tournament or a tailgate or something like that. So that's an opportunity for them to sponsor something and show that they support name, image, likeness and the concept of name, image, likeness, but maybe they don't have a business that they can directly tie it to. And then there are the fans. We're going to have an opportunity for all fans to be able to contribute to this, whether it's $20 or $100 a month. There's going to be an opportunity for people to get involved if they want to. So we really see it ranges the whole gamut. And then the DGD fund, that was imperative for us at the beginning to have that option, to have the charitable option. And, I originally met with John because, I wanted to keep all these Georgia businesses together, the Icon Source with Drew and DGD Fund with John. And, we met, and I was really just meeting to see if they would work with us. And then, after about 30 minutes talking to him, I'm like, man, why don't I just hire you? Like this is great. He kind of had passion for the industry, and, his perspective was awesome, and his enthusiasm was great. So we just brought him in, and now we have that option. We have that option for fans and for contributors to go the charitable route. Or if an athlete wants to, pick a charity of his choice, then we have that too.
Well, I'll tell you, Matt, if somebody would have said 2 years ago that you'd be the CEO of the Classic City Collectives and be working with NIL, I would have wondered what planet they came from. First of all, what was NIL 2 years ago? What is a collective 2 years ago? And we're moving really fast. So I feel like we've kind of outlined, or we've tried to outline what this is and how it works. And I see some questions, and I kind of want to go along, and someone jokes in here, I'll give $500 to the Arch Manning Fund. Okay, well, time out. You can't put money out there as an inducement to get players to come here. That's one of the rules, right? Is that you can't say, we've got a $1,000 deal waiting for player X if he signs with Georgia. Can't do that. And yet, Matt, I read this report the other day that there could be an $8 million NIL deal waiting for a student athlete if he chooses a certain university. Help me clear the air on this one.
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot in what you just said. So yes, the rule is it cannot be a recruiting inducement to attend your university. So what does that mean? That means if I go out and I meet with a recruit and I say, I want you to come to the University of Georgia, and here are the 7 deals I have for you. If you step foot on our campus and you sign, this is what you get. Okay, that's a recruiting inducement. Okay. Now, I have not read the contract that everyone's talking about. All I know is the same thing everybody else knows from The Athletic. Okay. And based on what I saw on The Athletic, I can see a way that it could be okay because that kid plays football in the state of California. California currently allows high school athletes to do NIL deals. So the portion of the contract that they talked about in The Athletic that said he could make $350,000 or whatever it is, right now, he probably could. Okay. Now, I don't know what collective this is, or even if it is a collective. I mean, because we're only getting one side of the story. We're getting it from a lawyer who helped with the contract. Okay. So if that collective said this is contingent on you going to the University of Tennessee, or whether it's Texas, or whether it's Florida, or whoever it may be, if they specifically laid that out and said this is the school, that's a huge problem. I mean, that's an issue. And from the article, it looks like that it was, it just said wherever you go. So maybe there's a line there. There might be some other recruiting rules that could be at play here. I'm not sure. I don't know the details. I don't know if, they went out there and wined and dined him or what happened. I have no idea. But look, I mean, people love stories like that. They love to inflate this and think that this is the new normal. I'm telling you, it's not the new normal. It's really not. I've been involved in recruiting visits. I've heard conversations and stuff whenever I worked at Georgia. And look, the 99% of high school kids are not picking a school solely because of NIL. But they will drop your school if you don't have a plan for NIL at all. Like everybody's like, oh, it's not about football anymore. It's not about the facilities anymore. All that stuff still matters. And NIL is just a component of that. Yeah, like anybody would view it the exact same way. If I'm getting a job offer, do I have an opportunity to make money over my next 4 years? or not. I mean, if it's a place that I'm not going to be able to make money, then I'm probably not going to take that job. So it's the same with these high school kids and their evaluation of where they're going to play their sport.
Well, this is why the Classic City Collectives is so important and why it's the biggest story of the offseason, because this is the mechanism that, as Matt says, that players want to know that there's a mechanism in place for them to earn NIL money. And if you've got a good quality system in place, like Matt's putting forward, a former compliance officer that's going to keep Georgia out of that hot water and away from those potential problems, those potential violations that could come back to bite you, that could lead to sanctions, that could lead to restrictions if schools aren't compliant, right? You got to have somebody that's sharp as a tack on top of this, because the rules are changing. This is a very fluid situation, and you heard Matt say that it's not going to be that. Well, right now, it is the Wild West. We're still trying to sort through. We're still trying to figure out. The states aren't the same. In California, you can do this. In Michigan, you may not be able to do that. At some point, you would like to think, Matt, that we're all going to see these programs are all going to be on a level playing field once again. Now, the value of the NIL, for example, I look at JT Daniels deals. And even though JT Daniels is transferring out, just the fact that prospective recruits saw that the Georgia quarterback had a deal with Zaxby's, had a deal with a card company, had a deal with an online apparel store. They said, you know what, you go to Georgia, you can get those sort of NIL deals. Now, JT was hooked up with Everett Sports Management, one of the top agencies out there, who now has secured Stetson Bennett and Brock Bowers. Again, why is this attractive? Well, because Everett Sports Management or the University of Georgia can't go out there and say, if you come here, you're going to get deals with Zaxby's and you're going to get deals with apparel companies and you're going to get, but no, you can't do that. But they can say, we've had players here before that have had NIL deals. And we have this Classic City Collectives over here that works with these companies and has this mechanism to hook people up with student athletes. And Matt, what are some of the things, for example, that Classic City Collectives is involved in that help players get NIL? I think I saw that maybe there were some appearances or things like that, appearance fees that kids can earn.
Yeah, look, like we're looking at this from a very holistic viewpoint. I think a lot of the collectives that have been popping up, they were very early adopters to this. So everyone says, oh, Georgia's behind. Oh my God, what are we going to do? No, we're not behind, because what they're doing, their model that they've created at most of these places are not sustainable. We are creating a sustainable model. What does that mean? You know, you hear me throw around sustainable all the time. Well, how many collectives do you think can keep going 3, 4, 5 years down the road by just asking for money? Like, I go to the exact same people every year and say, hey, can you give me the exact same amount again? I need to, move from this hand to this hand to pay some players. No, what we're trying to do is build an ecosystem where these athletes can do it themselves, can build their own brand, can get out there, get their face out there, do digital content, do appearances. People get to know them. And whenever people know the athlete, then the deals come to them. We don't have to go out and beg people to contribute to this. I always go back to, I grew up in a college town, and I always remembered the athletes who came to my school, my elementary school or my middle school or whatever. They came and spoke to us. So then on Saturdays, I felt like that guy was my friend. I couldn't imagine being a business owner and having that same feeling. Like, I feel like I know that person. I feel like they could represent my brand well. So we want them to be put in that position. We want to give them all the tools that they need to succeed. And that's, getting their brand out there, not just checking the boxes, not just moving the cash around. Like, that's not what we're doing. That's not a sustainable model. And in my opinion, that's not NIL, because there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here for student athletes to learn skills that I wish I knew when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about money. I had 2 calculus classes and no personal finance class. I didn't know how to write a check. So, just being able to arm them with this is an incredible opportunity to learn about taxes. And, it's a great thing about Icon Source is all the deals funnel through Icon Source, even the ones that we facilitate, and 1099 at the end of the year goes to the athletes. So you're not going to get tripped up by the federal government. We're all about helping the athlete. I know everybody says that. Oh, it's so cliche, just about helping the athlete. But we really are. I mean, I've been there. I worked with them for 13 years. Staten is in the locker room with these guys. We understand their time demands. We understand what it means to be a student athlete. We want to make this as easy as humanly possible for them to build their brand, and what does that mean, and understanding that, and then also having these opportunities to endorse a local business, something that they actually like. Something that a business reached out to them, they're like, oh, I mean, I saw you eating Barbaritos the other day. Like, that'd be great if you endorsed us. Like, we want this to be more of an organic system. I mean, there's no reason it can't be.
When this first came out, Matt, Kirby Smart is really, and I don't need to tell you this, you worked closely with Kirby as this compliance officer, but Kirby's about really being all in, right? And the last thing Kirby wants is any sort of distraction, anything that could potentially divide a locker room. But I'll give Kirby credit on this one. Even though this NIL is just rife with potential distraction and the potential to divide a locker room, Kirby recognized that, hey, look, this is a part of the landscape now. He can't change the rules. He's accepted that. I remember at signing day, someone said, Kirby, what do you think of this mess? And he said, well, you might call it a mess, but this is the world I live in, and I need to live in it as best as I can and give our student athletes the same opportunities, if not better, than they could get other places. This has become a part of a successful football model. And the fascinating thing about this is that these collectives, what we're talking about, in this case, Classic City Collectives and its association with the University of Georgia, I use that word lightly, have to stress once again, this is not a part of the University of Georgia, but it is associated as it secures NIL deals for University of Georgia athletes. Everybody is trying to build the perfect wheel here. Everyone is trying to build the best collective. And Matt, I would ask you, what do you think some of the basic components of a successful collective are? You just mentioned the sustainability of it, one, and yet two, there is a difference from one school to another. You've worked at Tennessee, you've worked at Ohio State, you've worked at Georgia. We discussed this yesterday at the baseball game hanging out, that these schools, well, it's like they're all ice cream, but they're different flavors. What sets Georgia apart from some of those other schools, one? And two, what are some of the basics that are going to be in place for successful collectives as we move forward into this new frontier?
Yeah, I think there are a few components there that make a truly successful collective. One is you have to be in it for the right reasons. I don't think some of these collectives are in it for the right reasons, and that's to benefit the student athlete. At the end of the day, it's to benefit the student athlete and put your institution in the best position to recruit future student athletes. And that's not offering deals, that's presenting to future recruits the opportunities that exist here at Georgia, to show them that, look, we have all of this support. You can get whatever deal you want here because we have such great support. So I think that's the first component. Second, like we talked about, is sustainability. I mean, it has to be. Just like any other business, how do you scale it? How do you grow it? How is it sustainable or not? If it's not sustainable, then why are you doing it? So that's the second thing. And the third thing I think is the most important, like we talked about yesterday, is every school is different. And it's really understanding what your school is all about. Like at the University of Georgia, more so than probably anywhere else I've been, there is a real belief in protecting that logo, protecting that G and what that means. That G stands for a lot, to a lot of people. I mean, Georgia's an elite academic institution, an elite athletic institution. So, I told you this yesterday, and at other places I worked, it was like in my job, it was, can we do this or can we not do this? What does the rule say? Yes or no? And that was really the end of the conversation. And at Georgia, it was, can we do this? Yes or no? And what would people think about us if we did? So there was this other aspect in there. And that doesn't mean that we were not, on the cutting edge of things. It just means that, we had to work a little harder. We had to polish things a little bit more. And I don't think that's a problem. I think that aspect of the University of Georgia is why we're going to be the best collective out there, because we know that we have to polish things. We have to make it look good, sound good, be done for the right reasons. And everyone that's involved in this collective is 100% behind that.
Yeah,
I know. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I noticed that just coming to Georgia as the beat writer from other schools, there was that certain air about the university, and it doesn't happen by accident. And I think a lot of the people watching the broadcast tonight, or people as they think about what that G means. I mean, to me, this is what Vince Dooley handled for decades. He was the caretaker of the Georgia brand for decades as a head football coach, as an athletic director. I think even now, Matt, when we look around Athens and we see former coaches that still live in Athens and around Athens, to me, that says so much about the University of Georgia that so many of these former coaches are still here, and Georgia fans are still respectful of them and to them. That doesn't happen other places, but it's part of what you're talking about, I think, when we talk about this brand and what it means to so many different people.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the University of Georgia, we don't have to rely on NIL to do anything. We don't have to rely on NIL for the success of our athletic programs, because we have the best college town in the country. We have the best university in the country. We live in the best state in the country. We just won a national championship, in case anybody forgot about that. On football, we have the best recruiter in the country. I mean, we have so much to sell here. And when you add NIL on top of that, and what we're going to be able to offer and provide to our prospective student athletes and our current student athletes, I mean, that's like the whole package right there. When we have all of that clicking, I mean, that's what we're striving for.
So the reason why Kirby and Georgia endorse Matt is because he's an ideas guy. And I wasn't sure I wanted to talk about it, but I definitely do now. A little street cred for you, Matt. Matt actually invented the blue shirt. I gotta hear the story of how, for all the people that follow recruiting, they're going, wait a minute. First, we're talking about him as a compliance guy. Next, we're talking about him as a CAO of a collectives agency. He clearly has marketing skills. So now he's part of this recruiting machine and the blue shirt invention. What was the story of the invention of the blue shirt? Because I believe it had something to do with Tennessee signing 33 guys when you're only supposed to sign 25 a year. How exactly did that work?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So, so I was at Tennessee, and the AD at the time, Dave Hart, he came to me and he was like, "Look, man, we're getting ready to hire a new football coach, Butch Jones, and I'm going to move you into football." Great, I'd love to help football. This is awesome, man. No. I'm going to move your office like physically into football. I'm like, well, this is a disaster. No compliance guy has ever gone into football, right? It's like, that's usually a no-no, right? So reluctantly, very reluctant, literally my wife made me do it at the time. She was like, no, this is a good career move for you. So I credit her completely for that. And it ended up being the best move of my life. So go into football, and over time, I'm in every staff meeting. I'm in every recruiting meeting. I go to official visits, unofficial visits, all of this stuff, right? So I start to pay attention to what they're talking about. And I start raising things like, you guys can do that. And they're like, do what? I'm like, well, you can do it much better than that because the rules allow you to do it. And they're like, oh, I never knew that. It's because, they're afraid to ask some things. So we were in a staff meeting, and, we were talking about ways to bolster the walk-ons, bolster the recruiting class, especially with in-state guys who are maybe fringe guys for us. So, I had this little habit of closing my door and just kind of grinding away at some interps and stuff on the computer, and came up with this blue shirt concept. Someone had briefly dug into it at one point, but they never really implemented anything. So we took it the full way. We completely implemented it, the whole non-recruited status, and then they could come in and then they go on aid after the first practice. And no one really knew what we did at the time. Because if you get admitted to the university and you signed your offer letter to the university, then we could announce you with the class. So on signing day, we announced 33 guys, and the local, guys like you, the local guys are like, what is going on over there? I mean, like, did this rule change? Like, what's happened? They're trying to figure it out. And like, that was part of the deal with the guys that did it, is we were like, we're not going to tell anyone, you'll be like part of the class. So it was fun. It was fun to do something different. That's kind of how I got I guess my name for myself, is just trying to find little holes like that and arguing until someone agreed with me. Someone of power above me agreed with me, and then we pushed it. We implemented it. So yeah, getting into football at Tennessee was definitely the best move for me. That led to working with Coach Meyer at Ohio State, and then being an agent, and then ultimately coming here with Kirby.
Having that perspective, Matt, of, as you said, being an agent, being a compliance officer, being a CEO, doing some time at Barstool. I mean, you pretty much run the gamut of college football and seen it from so many different directions. And so now I'm going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball here, because what I've seen just in the last year and a half, the accelerated calendar, when Kirby started talking about that, you don't redshirt these guys because most of them are early enrollees. And when they're early enrollees, they're leaving after 3 years anyway. And I want to take this into a different direction just because of your football expertise. The college football playoff, we're seeing players that are opting out of these games if they're not college football playoff games. My question, will or could NIL change that, as maybe these players could have deals, agreements in place, one, and two, do you see the 12-team playoff coming, and what do you think will be the ramifications of Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC?
Well, to your first one, I think NIL has the potential to change everything, really, because I think this is the transformative change in college athletics. Everything was always built on this, concept of amateurism. And, now that that's changed, it could trickle down to literally everything. I mean, it could trickle down to the portal, obviously, transfer portal. And I'm not talking about just players leaving, but players staying, and also early declarations to the NFL. Maybe some of these guys who are testing it at the 4th round, 5th round projections, maybe they're like, you know what, why don't I just stick it out a year? I'm going to get a year better, like in Georgia's system, and I have the opportunity to make some money. I think that's a pretty fair deal for them. So I think, we'll see that. And, regarding the playoff, I mean, I have no idea. Look, like I was always a big hater of the BCS. I actually wrote my my law review paper in law school about dismantling the BCS and antitrust. That's how much I dislike it.
Wow.
So yeah. So, I've always been a proponent of 12 for no other reason than I'm a fan and I just love, more football. I think it's great. But obviously I don't see a ton wrong with what we have right now. I mean, look, it's working out, especially in the SEC. It's working out. And maybe if I worked in a different conference, I might have a different opinion. But I kind of like it how it is. I'll stick with Commissioner Sankey on that, and we'll roll with 4.
You mentioned Commissioner Sankey. As I look at the the collectives right now, I see Florida with the fund. I see South Carolina, Auburn, Kentucky, Miami, Missouri. There's speculation, Matt, that every Power 5 school will have a collective associated with it in the next year. Again, they all have to have some mechanism in place to help these student athletes secure deals, because once again, I'll repeat it, the school can't do it. Kirby can't do it. Josh Brooks can't do it. Nobody at the University of Georgia can dip their toe in the NIL waters and secure deals for the players, and they can't use NILs to recruit. That's why they need to have the collectives agency in place. In Georgia's case, Classic City Collectives with Matt Hibbs, the CEO, who's sitting with us here tonight. So before I let you go, Matt, I want to ask, what's the next step? If I were going to come up to you on the street and say, you're on this collectives business, where are we now and what's next?
Yeah, look, I've heard all that stuff too. Every school is going to have a collective, and they probably will. All these Power 5 schools will probably have someone who will establish a collective. And then I think a year from that, half of them or more will be gone. because people will realize that it's incredibly difficult. It's not like this sexy thing that everybody thinks is just super easy to take money over here and I'm going to be doing all these cool promotional items and meet and greets. Like, it's a lot of work and it's very nuanced. It's incredibly nuanced and you have to know what you're doing. So a lot of these collectives won't, and they'll get their athletes in trouble. The athletes will lose eligibility. Athletes will endorse something that they thought was fine. Oh, an alcohol company. Well, at the University of Georgia, you can't endorse an alcohol company. So there you go, collective. You just screwed up your athlete. So I think a lot of people will jump into the space, realize it's really hard, realize it's a full-time job. It's not just like a side thing you do on the weekends because it's cool. And then they'll fall out. And I think, you'll start to see some of the smaller schools maybe like creating little regional collectives or something. I can see that happening at some point because you're going to have to pool resources, pool employees to be able to really, really make this thing beneficial at some of those smaller schools. Schools like Georgia, LSU, Texas, though they will have their own and it will survive, because the people running them will figure it out, or they'll hire somebody that understands what they're doing, one of the two. But they're gonna survive because they have to. It is the new arms race. I mean, that's like, I hate to say that, but it's when Nick Saban made whatever $1 million salary at one point, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe a head coach is making $1 million. And then you find a way, and now they're making $10 million. It's just like whenever the first facility had a bowling alley in it, or big screen TVs. Like, why does the athletes need that? Well, now everyone has to have games in big screen TV. So it's like you find a way to adapt to the environment to make yourself competitive, and that's what we're going to do, and that's what the big schools are going to do. And we're just extremely confident in our ability to be the best at this.
How could people learn more about Classic City Collectives, and how could people get involved? I mean, we talk about these appearances. I mean, could somebody book a Georgia football player for their kid's birthday party if they wanted to?
Yeah, so right now, we're building a very robust website. We've partnered with a great team at C-Spark Go, and they're building a great website for us. And we're going to have a menu of options for people to choose from. The athletes will be able to opt into certain categories that they're comfortable doing. And, a fan can go on there and see what, Stetson Bennett, for example, has opted into. And yeah, if they want to do a cameo style video for their kid's birthday, that's an option. Autographed memorabilia, meet and greets, certain things like that will all be there. But again, like, we really want to make sure that we're creating an ecosystem that's friendly for the athlete, that's not a huge demand on their time, and they're able to really do what they feel comfortable doing. But yeah, we are going to provide any and everything that the fans and supporters want from NIL.
Listen, again, I know it's early in the process for a lot of fans wrapping their brain around it, but I think if they've figured out anything tonight, Matt, it's how sharp you are. It's the depth of your background. I think they understand why you're back in the University of Georgia community, getting endorsed by Kirby Smart and Josh Brooks. I mean, you're an ideas guy with a perspective like I can't even think of anyone else who's as well-rounded and has the ideas that you do. And it is the Wild West out there. And yet I feel like talking to you, there's all these great ideas, and yet somehow I feel like it's all balanced with that compliance background that you have. Like, we're going to be as aggressive as we can and get everything we can, but we're staying in this box of the rules. Nothing bad's going to happen to Georgia, but on the flip side, they're going to be aggressive and they're going to do all they can for their student athletes to get deals. That's a win-win scenario. So I think people are going to see more of you. I think they're going to hear more about Classic City Collectives. I think we'll look back on this interview in a year and we'll say, wow, the plane was just lifting off. What if we knew then what we know now? But with you at the controls, Matt, I think the University of Georgia and the fan base can have a lot of confidence that there's a lot of exciting deals and opportunities ahead that student athletes are going to be drawn to. And I think indirectly will attract them to the University of Georgia, knowing that you've got this marketplace set up with guys like you and Drew Butler out there. Man, it's sophisticated And yet at the same time, I feel like you have a firm grip on this.
I appreciate that, Mike. Yeah, we I think we really have a unique team, with John and I, and we're like I said before, we're incredibly confident that we really understand this space and we're able to innovate this like no one else in the country is doing.
Well, I look forward to seeing more of these student athletes. You mentioned people getting to know them and how that benefits them and the brand. I think Kirby Smart recognizes that. I know you're going to be integral to that process. This is going to be a big win for the fans as well. So we'll close the first half of the show. I want to thank Matt Hibbs again for joining me tonight. He's the CEO of Classic City Collectives. You might need to go back and hit the replay button because I'm telling you, this is some complex stuff we're dealing with, but it's so important to the future of successful college athletics. Now let's take a moment and recognize our sponsor, Ingles.
It's in our hearts to feel for you. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. But we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back. With open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand, community strong.
Well, hey, Mike Griffith here, and I'll tell you, I'm just texting Matt right now on his appearance, and this is a complex topic. It really is, and it's so complex that a lot of people aren't even going there yet. They're not talking about it. You're not seeing the collectives hitting the mainstream news yet because a lot of people are waiting and seeing. And one thing about these collectives is they're all a little bit different from one school to another school to another school. They all have different models. But at the end of the day, the objective is to have a system in place to get these student athletes in position to get NIL deals. And the better your collective's agency, the more attractive your school is going to be. So I hope you guys can appreciate exactly what Matt was talking about. And again, it's as time goes by, everything he said is going to make more and more sense. Right now, we're on the front end of this. Right now, this is a matter for University of Georgia fans to understand what's happening, okay? When NIL was hatched last July 1st, as Matt said, college athletics changed. It's not going back. Now, what I think we all hope is that there will be some standardization, almost like a salary cap, right? A level playing field. You heard him talking about the report about a kid from California making over $300,000 because you can there. Somehow that doesn't seem right to me. But if that's what California is doing, does that mean what Florida is? That Florida going to do it now? Is Georgia going to? There's got to be some standardization, I believe, to these rules. Right now, it's a lot of Wild West, and that's why Georgia is good to have an association with a guy like Matt. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I could listen to Matt forever. I talked to him 3 hours at a baseball game yesterday. It's still sinking in for me. I'm still trying to learn as much as I can about this because the program that builds the best collective association is going to have a huge advantage. And you heard Matt use the word arms race. He didn't really want to say that, but that's really what it is. It's really going to be important to have that collective's agency in place that, number one, is compliant, but number two is getting those student athletes the best possible NIL deal. So let's scratch the collectives talk for the evening and move on to the new basketball hire, Mike White. And that was a bit of a surprise, frankly. I thought the Gates coach from Cleveland State was going to get it. I'd been told that he was the front runner for the job. I sensed that the Mike White deal came in place very late in the process. And I look at this as a win-win all the way around. And I know that there's some sensitivity from Georgia fans because you hired the Florida coach. Right off the top, you say, well, wait a minute, Florida, bad, Georgia, good. That's not a very sophisticated, complex, or realistic way to look at sports rivalries. Again, I know fans have their inherent dislikes and when's the last time they beat you and all this stuff. Listen, everybody's in the same industry. There's a lot of professional respect between these schools, okay? That's somewhat of a naive fan's take, but the real take is you hired a coach who's been to an Elite Eight, who's been to 4 NCAA tournaments, who's been the coach of the year in 3 different conferences. He's only 45 years old. He played in the SEC, was a 4-year starter who took an Ole Miss team to 3 NCAA tournaments as a player, including the school's first ever NCAA tournament win. So you wonder, could Mike White be the guy that gets Georgia basketball over the hump? Well, he already was a part of Ole Miss getting over a hump of sorts as a player in the 90s. Then you look what he did at Louisiana. I believe he won 3 conference regular season titles in his 4 years at Louisiana Tech. Georgia's got 1 SEC regular season title in school history. Now, what Mike White said yesterday was limitless potential for the school, or a limitless future. I think Josh Brooks feels like Mike White is a guy with a great knowledge of the league. He's been in the league for 7 years already. Again, those 4 NCAA tournaments, 1 year it was canceled. Before this year, Florida was the only program in the SEC that had gone to the previous 4 NCAA tournaments. I mean, that's the sort of consistency that Georgia wants to get to. And that's Josh Brooks' pledge, is for Georgia to compete for championships in all 21 of its sports. And we all look at basketball and we realize that that's going to be the steepest hill to climb for a couple of reasons. One, we talked about it. There's no tradition, right? You've won 1 regular season SEC title in school history. That is the Vanderbilt of college football in the SEC. That's terrible. It's been a coach's graveyard. It's been hard for any coach to generate excitement for college basketball at Georgia. Well, because you got to win, number one, but 2, I mean, football is such an overwhelming choice. There's times when I talk about basketball and people, well, that's it, I'm done. If you're talking about basketball, I'm out of here. That attitude isn't going to float the boat when it comes to Georgia moving forward as a basketball program. Mike White gives Georgia a reset, a chance for people to get excited about basketball again, because now it's not just Mike White, it's Josh Brooks too. Josh has got to figure out how to make this coaching hire work. He would not have hired someone that he didn't believe can lead Georgia to the next level. I think Stegman Coliseum is one of the hurdles. It's aesthetically pleasing, but it is the, I want to say, second oldest facility, basketball facility in the SEC, and it's the 3rd smallest. So other than being old and small, it's fine, right? So how do you change that? Well, I'm not sure that you can change the age of the facility. They've already done some enhancements. They need to do more. The locker rooms need to be brought up to speed. I think the concourses can be improved even more. I think the Georgia marketing team does an outstanding job. I'm just not sure how much better a job marketing they can do. I think they already do a great job. But that collectives, right? That organization that Matt Hibbs is the CEO of, that guy you just listened to, that incredibly gifted guy with that unbelievable background, he's an idea guy. How is Georgia going to get collectives in place for basketball players? How are they going to do it? At Kentucky, freshman point guard has a deal with Porsche. A Porsche. He's driving a Porsche at Kentucky. Okay? Can they get Fords at Georgia? Can they get Dodges? Can they get anything at Georgia? I don't know. I don't know how Georgia is going to figure out a way to pay these players. But that's what's happening everywhere else. And that's why they're going everywhere else. And that's why they've been going everywhere else. And for the people that say, oh, but Atlanta's right there, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's laughable. I talked to one of the other candidates for the job about Georgia, and I asked him why it was such a tough sell. He said, for one, the facilities, they're nothing special. They ain't great. Okay, you got no advantage there with your none. You're barely, I don't even know if you'd say you're up to par, right? It's not the worst facilities ever, but they're not on the good side of the spectrum, right? They'd be below average. So that's one. Okay. 2, you got to find a way to get these players money. Other schools recruit the heck out of Atlanta. Georgia, just because Atlanta's in the state of Georgia doesn't give you some right to these. It's not like these players really care about, well, I'm going to go to Georgia because I grew up in Atlanta. No, they grew up playing AAU ball, traveling around the country and being wined and dined, if they're the great players, and being taken care of and having these big-time coaches in their lives since 10th grade. There's 40 or 50 of them sitting up in the stands at the Peach Jam. It looks like a who's who of the College Basketball Hall of Fame Because remember, these guys go in the Hall of Fame before they finish their career. So these players are not necessarily enamored with staying in state. You've got to give them a reason to, right? And that's where these NIL collectives could be so important for Georgia basketball to move forward. So you got to figure that out. How do you get the players here? How do you improve your facilities? Before any of these X's and O's matter, it's going to be fascinating because Brooks is a competitive dude, right? You've got a young, aggressive athletic director. The hires that he has made, and this is how you knew that he wasn't going to hire Jonas. They're all proven commodities. Josh Brooks doesn't take chances. When you're Georgia, you don't need to take a chance on a coach. You are an institution that can go out and get a proven commodity. Even in basketball, where you've been at the bottom of the barrel, the school's reputation is such, Josh Brooks' reputation is such that you can land a guy like Mike White. 45 years old, 4 NCAA tournaments, an Elite 8. My goodness, he's produced 8 All-SEC players in 7 years. This is an accomplished coach. His wife was an All-SEC volleyball player. She gets it. He's got 2 brothers that are athletic directors, one at Tennessee, one at Florida Atlantic. He's got a sister who's an associate athletic director, for goodness sakes. So this is a family that gets it. He understands the lay of the land. He knows what he's up against. There's a value to having that sort of perspective. It's going to make it that much easier for him and Josh Brooks to work together to try to move basketball to a place where Georgia basketball fans and Georgia fans in general will embrace it. So I like the hire. You hear it in my tone. I think he got the absolute most qualified guy that Georgia could possibly get. And, oh, by the way, no compliance issues. Right? Once again, just like Matt Hibbs, they went out and they get this former compliance officer who's been an agent, who's been a marketing guy with Barstool, who's been at Ohio State, who's been at Tennessee, who's been at Miami, and they bring him in. And Hibbs is a guy that does everything above board with great ideas, right? There's some other people running collectives out there that I don't know if I'd ask them to watch my house for the weekend, if you know what I mean. So the fact that Georgia and Brooks is associating and hiring these upstanding people, this is part of what Matt was talking about when he talked about the G brand and how Georgia is so careful with that. And again, I credit Coach Dooley because I think he really set the tone for years, decades for what Georgia is. But this is consistent with the Josh Brooks hiring model. So I'll leave the Mike White hire there. Tomorrow, start of spring football, right? This is what we're all here for, spring football. And I'm just now talking about it. That's how big a deal collectives is. That's how newsy the Mike White hire is, just 24 hours ago or so. The 3 biggest offseason stories to me, and you already heard me say the collectives is the biggest because this is the new model for college sports. And Classic City Collectives with Matt Hibbs is really going to determine a large part of Georgia's future, in my opinion, them getting this right. 2, I think Matt Luke leaving was one of the biggest stories of the offseason. Twofold. 1, because it's a sign of the times. And Kirby told us that really good coaches were getting burned out by this industry because of because of the complications of the NIL, because of the complications of the one-time transfer, because of the accelerated recruiting schedule. These coaches are burning out faster than ever because to win championships, right, you got to work smarter, but you also have to work harder, smarter and harder. I know they say work smarter, not harder. In Kirby's book, work harder and work smarter because guess what? That's what it takes to be on top. That's what got Georgia on top. That's what will keep Georgia on top. They're going to be very challenged. When you lose a guy like Matt Luke, that's a gut punch, right? I think Matt was doing a great job with this offensive line. I like the Stacey Searles hire, by the way. I'm on board with that. Coach Searles was hired twice by Mark Richt. I talked to Mark Richt about it. He loves Searles. He believes he's going to be a great fit on Kirby's staff. I wonder about Matt Luke's leaving and how much impact that has on the recruitment of Arch Manning. I really do. Matt Luke being at Ole Miss all those years that Arch Manning was growing up and going to Ole Miss camp, his relationship with Arch Manning's dad and the Manning family, and now Matt's not there anymore. I wonder, I'm not saying that's a deal breaker, but I have to wonder how that could potentially affect the recruitment of Arch Manning. And then the third biggest story of the offseason, to me, the dogs at the combine. I said it on Feinbaum's show. A lot of Alabama fans got bent out of shape. I said Georgia beat Alabama on the field. They beat him at the combine, and they're going to beat him in the NFL draft. And some said, well, what was the score? I said, no, listen, don't be a wise guy. The reality is this. Perception is ongoing. It doesn't just stop. It doesn't go, well, the championship game was played, Georgia won. Let's forget all about college football until August or September. No, that's not how this works. That's not how it works in the minds of recruits. It's not how it works in your mind. We're paying attention to all these off-season stories. And you better believe that these prospects are looking to see what schools are putting the most guys in the NFL and what schools are the analysts talking the most about. And when the NFL Network said Georgia won the combine, that resonated with prospects. That's one more thing for Kirby Smart to sell. He can talk about, as you heard Matt talk about, you talk about the university's academics, you can talk about Athens, you can talk about the Classic City collectives, you can talk about winning the national championship. But at the end of the day, show me the money. You can talk about putting guys in the NFL. You can talk about taking a 3-star player like Jordan Davis and turning him into a 340-pound guy running a 4.78 40 and winning the Outland Trophy and the Bednarik Award. You can talk about having 4 guys projected to go in the first round of the NFL draft. You can talk about your medical staff and how George Pickens can tear an ACL and stay at the University of Georgia and rehab and be back running at the combine and turn a 4.47 and play the last 4 games of the season 8 months after tearing an ACL. These are the sort of advertisements that put Georgia on top. These are the sort of things that Kirby Smart can sit in the living room and sell to parents and prospects. And yes, absolutely the combine and absolutely the NFL draft. So those are the 3 biggest offseason stories. The collectives is how Georgia moves forward with this new model. 2, Luke leaving, Manning recruitment, because I think the Manning recruitment is huge. Whoever gets Arch Manning, I mean, my goodness, I could already give you 100 Sports Center lead-ins with Arch Manning. I mean, this is going to be a show like you've never seen. I still remember when Peyton Manning was at Tennessee, and you couldn't turn around without hearing Peyton Manning in Tennessee in the SEC for 4 years. And that's the way it's going to be with Arch Manning. Dogs at the combine, big, really big deal. With practice starting tomorrow, I wanted to outline some guys that I'm kind of looking for. I want to see what's going to happen, some storylines. My first storyline, and I don't expect necessarily that Kirby's going to talk about this every day or maybe even talk about it at all, but I want to know what's going on at the quarterback position. I really do. I think Stetson Bennett returns as a national champion. I know Todd Monken told boosters earlier this offseason that it's Stetson Bennett's job. And I also know that Monken is the type of coach that likes to give the number 1 70, 80% of the reps. It ain't about 2 or 3 guys standing out there competing. That's not how it works at Georgia at quarterback from week to week. Monken's a pro guy. He's got his guy. He wants that guy groomed and ready. In fairness to Stet's never been that guy in the spring, right? As I said earlier today, raise your hand if you weren't ahead of Stetson Bennett at quarterback on the depth chart at some point. I mean, think about it. Jake Fromm and Jamie Newman and JT Daniels, Dwan Mathis, Carson Beck. I mean, everybody was ahead of Stet. And yet here he is, number 1, going into spring drills. What happens with Brock Vandagriff and Carson Beck? They didn't come to Georgia to sit for 2 and 3 years. I can promise you that. That's not why Vandagriff flipped from Oklahoma. It's not why Beck flipped from Alabama. This is year 3 for Carson. This is year 2 for Brock. Gunnar Stockton, don't expect much out of him right out of the gate. It takes time to learn this offense, pro-style offense, talented kid, but definitely will have to wait his turn. But between Vandagriff and Beck, could either one of them be good enough to change Kirby's mind or to change Monken's mind? Is there any chance at all, any chance whatsoever that anybody other than Stetson Bennett could be the number 1 quarterback coming out of spring? Any chance at all, barring injury? I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't. I'd say there's a good chance that Beck or Vandagriff leaves after the spring, but maybe not necessarily, right? Because where are you going to go? The devil you know versus the devil you don't know. JT Daniels hasn't even figured out where he's going to go yet. right? He's got to graduate from Georgia before he goes somewhere else as a graduate transfer. He visited Oregon State. I knew they were on the map. You hear about West Virginia. You'd heard about LSU. Well, they got their guy now with Jaden Daniels. You hear about West Virginia. You hear about TCU. You hear about Notre Dame. You hear about Missouri. Who knows how that unfolds, right? And JT is going to school watching this every day. If you're Beck or you're Vandegrift, you're trying to win playing time at Georgia. You're not out there in the portal talking to these schools and investigating. So the premise that one of them will leave may make sense on the surface, but in reality, where are they going to go? It's not necessarily a done deal that one of them goes, even if they're not the number two. It would seem to make sense, but where would you go? Where would you go that would be better than Georgia? Because everybody's got a quarterback or two or three. And you're going to step into that room after spring drills and be elevated to number one magically? No, probably not. So to me, that's one of the storylines to watch. What happens in the quarterback room? Is there any chance whatsoever that any of these guys can pass Stetson, or is it going to be Stetson Bennett come hell or high water? I don't know. The new front seven, my goodness, the talent that's leaving: Trayvon Walker, Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Channing Tindall. Who are the next men up, right? We know Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter and who? Nazir Stackhouse. What's Stackhouse going to look like? Smout London at linebacker, Jamal Dumas-Johnson, obviously Nolan Smith. But what is that front seven, and how close can that front seven come to replicating that historically dominant front seven? It's going to be a drop-off. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're not going to be as good defensively up front. But how much of a drop-off will there be, and who are the new names and faces that we're going to be seeing in that front seven making plays? Because you know this Kirby Smart defense is still going to be salty. And then three, and this sounds really easy, and it sounds cliche, but it's really not easy. The leaders. Along with 14 NFL draft picks, I believe you're going to have at least 14 NFL draft picks if you're Jordan, maybe 15 if a team likes John Fitzpatrick enough to wait on him to return from the foot. He actually had surgery on both of his feet. This guy played with broken feet all year. How tough is John Fitzpatrick? I need to get John on my show. I know we interviewed him dozens of times over at Butts-Mehre, but that was back when the Kirby Smart filter was on. I got a feeling John Fitzpatrick isn't necessarily going to come in here and say the craziest stuff anyway, but maybe he would let his guard down. I want to know just how much pain he was in, because this is a guy, you talk about a guy that gave it up for the team. John Fitzpatrick playing with broken feet. I mean, this is one of the things you look at and you shake your head. And someday when you talk about this national championship team and you talk about the level of buy-in and you talk about the leadership, John Fitzpatrick's got to be one of the guys you mentioned. You got to mention a guy playing with broken feet. I mean, that's just, I don't even know how that's possible. I can't imagine the pain that this kid went through from week to week. So when I talk about replacing leaders and guys like Jordan Davis and guys like Devontae and Nakobe Dean and Lewis Seen, you're talking about the brain center of the defense between Nakobe and Lewis. These are future NFL starters. This is why Georgia never had breakdowns. This is why you didn't see breaks. Oh my gosh, look at that guy running wide open. What did you see that maybe once or twice the whole year? Out of how many plays? Hundreds of plays. You might have saw one or two bust that really cost the Bulldogs. And they would tell you they weren't perfect, right? Guys like Chris Smith would say, oh, no, we got to go back to the lab. We got plenty of things to fix. You guys just didn't notice it. But there really weren't as many flagrant breakdowns for Georgia's defense. In fact, I could count on one hand the 4 years I've covered the program where I've seen flagrant breakdowns cost this team touchdowns. There's been other programs I've covered where there was one every game. I'd say in the 4 years I've covered, the 4 seasons I've covered, I've seen maybe 4 or 5 the entire time. That's how well-drilled Kirby Smart's defenses are. Who are going to be those leaders? Who are going to be those guys? Not just on the field, but off the field. You got to stay out of the headlines. You can't be speeding through construction zones. You can't be making headline. This is accountability. You can say, oh, that can happen to anybody. Yeah, but it can't happen to you. If you are a representative at that level, and it's almost unfair because, well, these are just kids. They are. But part of coming to Georgia, and playing football is being in that fishbowl. Because look, we all follow Georgia football so closely. This is a daily sport here. That doesn't stop. There's no off season. One of the funny things, Mark Rick was telling me a story about how Matthew Stafford and Noshawn Marino came to him. And they used to have a rule, I think he was saying, where they had to live on campus the first year or two. And Stafford and Marino came to him and said, Coach, we got to get off campus. I mean, they'd sit down. There are people asking for autographs when they'd sit down to eat in the cafeteria, when they'd be trying to leave the dorm. There were autograph seekers blocking their way. That's why they needed to live off campus. So some things have changed. Some things haven't. It's still that way, right? And even more so now with the cell phone. Everything's on video. Everything's, Snapchatted away. It's incredible the amount of scrutiny that these young people are under. It's absolutely incredible. I believe that just for regular young people, heck, for adults, you hear about so much stuff about anxiety. Everybody's got anxiety. Well, they got anxiety because they're in constant communication, hearing everybody's feelings, everybody's thoughts, everybody's opinions, everybody's criticisms. This is going to surprise you guys, but there's been some people that have been critical of me. I know, hard to believe, right? I go on my Twitter timeline. I start reading it. My friend goes, Griff, why do you even look at that? They're just going to say, I said, well, I can't. I'm drawn to it like a moth. I got to say, what do they say? What they say? Who said what? Someone said, when are you going to die? Somebody asked me that question 2 weeks ago. When are you going to croak? Man, I don't know. That's the last thing I wanted to think about. But he didn't like my opinion on football, so he dropped that on me. And I'm thinking, dang, this guy. I mean, this is some serious stuff, right? And these kids, when they play games, how they play, the criticism, the high expectation, the personal messages they get. I mean, no wonder they have anxiety. No wonder they're stressed out, because 24/7, you got somebody busting your balls on social media. It's unbelievable. I don't know. I hope that term wasn't out of bounds, but that's how it feels. And that's what it's like. And so that's why there's so much stress and pressure. So who are those Georgia athletes that rise above that fray, that aren't stressed out, that can take what comes with being a famous superstar athlete at Georgia and lead the way and set the example and live that life where even though they're in a fishbowl, they're able to maintain that level of professionalism that's expected, maybe unfairly, of an 18, of a 19, of a 20-year-old, right? There's professional athletes that can't handle that. And frankly, there's more scrutiny and attention paid to football players at Georgia than there are some professional athletes in sports. It's pretty amazing. It's a lot to think about. There's a lot of growth that needs to happen. One of the smartest things that Kirby did last year was these skull meetings, these skull sessions, where the players would get together and talk about their why, and talk about why they were playing, and learn one another's motivation, learn what made the other guy click. And the reason that was so important is because when there were times of adversity or times of stress, the teammate was there to provide the pick-me-up, to keep that other teammate on course and directed. It was really brilliant. It was brilliant. It was tremendous team building. You're going to see a lot of programs copy Georgia. They're already doing it. They're trying to copy some of the stuff Kirby's doing because that worked. Because when you get beat by Alabama 41-24 like Georgia did, that could have been it. That could have been a knockout. Yeah, they were still in the playoff, but that could have destroyed the team's confidence. It could have led to finger pointing. It didn't. It didn't. Georgia got stronger and better. Michigan paid the price. They dominated Michigan. And that was a decent Michigan team. And Georgia absolutely dominated. And then that defense in the championship game. If the offense needed 4 quarters to get a touchdown, they'd have provided. That defense was not going to let Alabama beat them. Bryce Young, Heisman Trophy winner. They say if he was eligible, he'd be the number 1 pick in the draft. 1 touchdown. 6 trips inside the 30. 1 touchdown for Bryce Young. That defense did it all. They were amazing. They were bought in, and they were close. Who are those guys going to be now? Who's going to step up and provide the framework for that sort of buy-in, that level of commitment to one another, right? Who are those guys going to be? And every team's going to say they got good leadership, but it's just not true. Some teams have better leadership than others, and it has to run its course. It's not like Kirby can just pick these 4 or 5 guys and say, you, and you. No. This is earned on the field. This is earned with behavior and actions, not words. And it has to evolve organically. So when I say I want to see who it's going to be, it's not like I can go out there one day and look for the guy with the C on his jersey. No, I want to see how this evolves over time. I want to see who we're talking about at the end of spring drills. When Kirby stands up there and he picks those names that he talks about, he's very careful who he praises. He's also very specific who he's critical of. Public criticism from Kirby is not necessarily a bad thing. It means that Kirby believes you can do better to the point that he's going to use every tool, including public comment. Ask Richard LeCount about that. Remember how he used to talk about Richard LeCount? And we'd go back to Richard and we'd go, man, Coach Smart said blah. And Richard would go, yeah, man, he's all over me. But that's why I'm here, because I want to be coached up by Kirby. I was talking to guys before I let you go tonight. I was talking to some guys at the Combine, and I haven't really figured out how to write the story yet, but I'll ask Kirby tomorrow at his press conference. The microphone, right? Kirby's on this microphone at practice, constantly calling out names of players. And the players say, you can't escape that microphone. You can't hide from the microphone. Kirby will see you. If you're not sprinting from one drill to the next, Kirby's going to see it. If you don't execute properly, right? If the uniform's not looking right, Kirby is going to call you out on this booming mic that goes over the whole practice field. How intimidating is that? And yet at the same time, Lewis Seen says, yeah, it's kind of fun unless it's you, right? So that's kind of one of the fun elements of Georgia football practices. Yes, tomorrow, Moose, Mike White will have a press conference tomorrow afternoon at 3:00 at Stegman Coliseum. We'll be there and we'll be asking Coach White some questions. It'll be I think it'll be a very formal ceremony. I think the president will be there as well as Josh Brooks. Again, a nice reset button for the University of Georgia basketball team. I want to see are there any questions. I'm going through the comments. This is always dangerous. When you go through the comments, remember what I said a minute ago about social media? Sometimes people say, like a couple weeks ago, it took me a week to get over the eyebrow question. I kept looking, are my eyebrows okay? People are like, what happened to Mike's eyebrow? Nothing happened to it. See, it's fine. But that night, I don't know what it was. It really kind of freaked me out. They take it out on you, Mike, because they are Georgia haters. Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose it's the team I cover, and I have to speak the truth on it. And when the team wins a national championship, there's a lot of really good things to say about Georgia. Now, you guys know that I'll be critical of things as well as positive. And it's funny because a lot of Georgia fans say that you're too tough on Georgia, right? And then people on the outside that see other programs say, oh, you must be a real Georgia homer. You can't really satisfy everyone. And quite frankly, I don't try to satisfy anyone. I just try to say what I think and what I know. And in tonight's case, I try to bring on a guy like Matt Hibbs. I'm telling you, this guy is so important to the future of Georgia athletics. And the interview that you saw were the baby steps for Matt. You're going to see him everywhere. You're going to hear more comments. And this is the CEO of an industry that's going to lead your program into the future. And as I said, you saw the plane taking off tonight. And I asked Matt some tough questions, and I provided some difficult analogies. And it's tough because it's a very fluid situation, this business that Matt's running. But I can't thank him enough for joining us tonight on Dog Nation. And I want to have him on again later on as this continues to evolve. This NIL, this collectives, this is going to continue to evolve. This part of the sports business. We didn't sign up for this. I get it. That's not why you love college football. I understand, right? But now it's a part of college football, and we've got a responsibility to tell that part of the story because you're competing here too. You're competing in football, basketball. You're competing in collectives now as well. Very important. So thank you again to Matt Hibbs for joining me. Some very exciting stuff coming tomorrow. I think we're all excited about the start of spring football. Don't forget Wednesday, there's going to be Pro Day That's going to be exciting as well. I'm not sure. I think Nakobe Dean is one of the guys who has a lot of drills yet to go. Darian Kendrick as well. Those are some guys that got some drill work to go through. Tuesday press conference with Kirby and players. Thursday press conference with more players as Georgia spring football starts. We'll have all sorts of information on Dog Nation. I know you guys follow that regularly. Tomorrow night is Connor in coverage, Connor Riley. Connor will be able to recap a lot of what Kirby says. He'll be able to recap some of the Mike White stuff. Wednesday, Jeff Santel does his Before the Hedges, Between the Hedges recruiting show. Of course, you have Brandon Adams each day at 10 o'clock on Dog Nation Daily. I see a question from Thomas. What time is the pro day on Wednesday? It goes all day. They have not announced the time when the media will be allowed in, but that's kind of an all morning function. As I recall, usually seems like it went from 9 to 1. But I'm just throwing that number out there. But that would be my approximate guess, Thomas. So I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's show. There was a lot of information, a lot of commentary. I appreciate your involvement in this. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you guys sharing this to other sites for more people to see our show. Get this information out there. Get Matt Hibbs out there. This Classic City Collective, so important. If you can share this show, it would really help that Classic City Collectives out. And certainly I appreciate it as well here at Dog Nation. So I'll let you guys go tonight. Everybody have a wonderful night. I look forward to seeing you later this week. Check me out, dognation.com, on Twitter at Mike Griffith 32.